County executive in Wayne County. All right, I'm going to start with you, Khalil, because it seems that we've had this conversation every single time I've been at this conference.
Right.
Going back, let's go back to 1978. We cannot get transit together in this region. We've never been able to come up with a unified system. And here we are again in 2018 having the same conversation. Yeah, lots of talk, but no action. How do you get people to accept the idea of $5.4 billion?
Well, you know, one, I tell you that $5.4 billion, first, it yields back about $1.3 billion in state and federal and fare box funds to the region. So it's not as expensive as you may think. Today in our region, we spend about $67 a person on transit. Should the RTA get on the ballot, and it will, if it does, we believe it'll pass, that number would go up to about $110, okay? Now, I'm not going to compare that to some of the major other regions in the country. New York spends $860 a person. Silicon Valley, the place that we're in constant competition with for talent and autonomous vehicle technology, they spend over $600 a person. But when you look at the Clevelands and the St. Louises, and when you look at, Phoenix or Portland or Minneapolis, smaller MSAs, they are sometimes more than doubling our investment in regional transit. And if Amazon told us anything, they told us that investment into public transportation is key to bringing talent that's going to bring the businesses we need in Wayne County. So people may say it's $5.4 billion. I say we can't afford not to spend that money.
Paul, I want to get your thoughts on that because we have been getting hammered this whole week about the idea about recruiting talent. Talent is attracted to things like good transit systems, new options for people. And it is something that is making us less competitive in a lot of people's eyes. Do you agree with that?
There's no question but that we do need a rapid transit system. And before we go out, I want to laud Khalil and County Executive Warren Evans for taking the initiative of driving this process forward, because I think that's very laudable. My opposition largely revolves around the thought that we're using 18th century technology to address a 21st century challenge. And here's what I would say. That if we aspire to be the leader in mobility throughout the United States and perhaps the world, which I think is a worthy goal for us, then I think we should be focused not on buses, but we should be focused on promoting autonomous vehicles as the means by which we achieve our goals.
Autonomous vehicles, though, are not with us quite yet. There's a lot of testing going on. We're doing a lot of research in that area, but we're not there yet. What's wrong with a stopgap system? In the meantime, increasing the buses until we actually get something that is going to be able to utilize emerging technology.
Well, I had the pleasure of listening to the presentation that Mr. Butler did the other day, and my impression is we're closer than we realize. And moreover, it's already being tested in places like Phoenix and Pittsburgh. And by the way, why is it Phoenix and Pittsburgh? It should be Detroit. This is the hub of mobility. We should be the beta test site for mobility using 21st century cutting-edge technology.
Oh, well, Craig, look at the 220 businesses that came out. Look at the 23 CEOs. You've got Ford and GM, the leaders in autonomous vehicle technology, saying we need public transit now. When I had this conversation with Mark Royce and the other CEOs, they asked us, what is the lifetime of a bus? I'm a proud member of the Smart Board. The lifetime of buses can be anywhere from 8 to 12 years. We're not going to see the autonomous vehicle technology that we want to see penetrate the market anywhere near that time. But in the meantime, I guarantee you this, we will continue to lose out on the Amazons, Foxcons, US Armies, and everybody else that thought Detroit was on this major comeback, that they wanted to at least explore this option to see if we were ready to make it all the way back. And so again, I feel like we just can't afford to just wait until, whatever the Jetsons may bring us in the future, right?
One of the things that we've been hearing a lot in terms of the opposition to this, Paul, though, is this notion that, look, this is something I'm never going to use. I don't utilize public transit. I've got my car. I shouldn't have to pay for this.
Well, here's what I would tell you, Craig. I am absolutely not opposed to helping the disabled, the elderly, and subsidizing them, as well as those who are low-income workers. I think a subsidy and a cost structure that's designed to help those folks afford transportation makes perfect sense. But when we put in place a cost structure and agree to overlay another government entity on top of existing government bureaucracies in order to essentially facilitate a lifestyle among millennials who don't want to buy cars, I don't see that as an appropriate use of taxpayer dollars.
Why not?
Well, because honestly, it is not much more than a redistribution of wealth. I mean, I can tell you in my case, I've run the numbers. It's going to cost us $315,000 per year in additional property taxes on our theaters in order to subsidize what I could really pay, $100,000 a year if you told me I need my workers to get to, be able to get to Imagine.
Well, your theaters are in opt-out communities, a lot of them.
Yeah.
Novi, Canton, both opt-out communities. Your employees do need to get to work.
And by the
Would it
way,
be helpful if they could actually get there on a bus and not have to walk the last 3 miles?
well, we don't have a challenge right now in recruiting high school students. Folks, their parents will drop them off, and and so throwing money at something that, in my opinion, doesn't create value commensurate with the cost is not a good plan.
So for every dollar you put into public transportation, you get $4 back into the economy, right? The notion that you brought up, we hear people say it a lot. I'm not going to ride the bus, so I don't want to pay for it. Well, my boss always says that if he never rode a bus, he would still pay for public transit the same way seniors pay for elementary school, the same way we all pay for community college, because the benefit will come back to us. Buses take cars off the road. That means that there's less accidents, that there's less death, that there's less resource on police, fire, EMS, that there's less congestion, that there's more increase in productivity or lower emissions. That means there's access to education, medication, workforce development training, and a whole lot of other things. For every dollar you put into public transit, you get $4 back into the economy, and that ends up resulting in more Imagine theaters.
I do want to talk about the competitiveness aspect of this whole thing, because a lot of people, Amazon basically flat out told us the lack of a cohesive transit system and the lack of regional cooperation was something that they were not appreciating about Detroit's bid. I think a lot of people were shocked we didn't make the top 25, but that was a pretty significant smackdown that we received right there. How do we address that? Because this is something they're looking at.
Well, let's cope with the reality of Amazon. We didn't come up with enough crony capitalism to make them happy. That's really what it boils down to. And they'll make every excuse in the world. We just didn't throw enough money at them. And by the way, I don't have the government throwing money at me to build more theaters. So why are we throwing money at Amazon to bring these jobs?
If I could,
But so basically, you're saying that the
It's a red herring.
reason they gave us was not real.
It's a red herring.
Okay.
So the reason why I take some exception to that, because I've heard other people say this. I'm the one that got the call from Amazon to tell us that we were not going to make the list. And that's because we had, at the county, worked really hard in attracting Amazon in Livonia, really hard in attracting Amazon in Romulus. Both those projects were very, very successful, okay? And what became very clear throughout the process is, incentives are something that people take into account. There's no doubt about it. But it is not the decision-making hierarchy at Amazon to say, because they gave us the most incentives, we're going to go there. What they clearly told me, and then I got 15 other people on the phone. Sandy Baru was on the phone, people from the state, people from Canada, the mayor's office, people that work for Dan Gilbert. They said, listen, talent is an issue, but there is no place in America that can backfill our order of 50,000 people making $100,000 a year. The question really is, do you have the amenities in life that's going to bring people from Chicago, Cleveland, Toronto, Grand Rapids, and bring them here? 25 to 30-year-olds, as he said earlier, they're just putting their keys down. They want to be on their devices to and from work. They want to watch movies. And so to be able to attract that kind of talent, okay, you need a really integrated public transportation system.
Well, I would respectfully submit that they're just flat wrong. The quality of life in Michigan, in my opinion, is second to none. I've lived here all my life. I'm a great example of someone who stayed in Michigan, opened his business in Michigan, grew his entrepreneurial business here. And I've got to tell you, I think that the naysayers or those who want to compare us and say that our amenities are not comparable with other parts of the country are just simply wrong on that basis as well.
But the transit issue is one of those things. There's a great question somebody asked. They asked them the last time they rode a bus here. Nobody rose their hand.
Yeah.
But then they said, when's the last time you took public transit when you were in another city? Oh, everybody raised their hand. And they go to Washington, they go to New York, Boston. You ride the T, you ride the Metro, you ride the subway. People utilize it because it's there. Is this one of those things that if we build it, they will come?
Well, again, in my book, we can't make up for the mistakes of the past by instituting technology that doesn't further our efforts in growing mobility here in Southeast Michigan. The other point
You
is...
could make self-driving buses too, though.
Well, that's true. What do you say we start with smaller vehicles first? But in my world, not only will autonomous vehicles help the disabled and the elderly, because who wants to sit in a cold bus shelter waiting for a queue line? And we know the ridership was abysmal during the wintertime. Why? Because it wasn't convenient. Bring those vehicles right to someone's doorstep. be the leader in mobility in the nation. Let's promote our own.
How about the notion of sort of using that from the place, get you from your door to the transit stop as the way to reach those communities that maybe aren't served by direct lines?
If you look at the Southeast Connect Michigan plan, I mean, we have $20 million annually for core area mobility for the exact problem that both of you were talking about. We do have seniors that can't make it to the bus stop, and so we've got some dial and ride, some door-to-door service involved in that for paratransit services for the disabled and the like. The nice thing about this plan is it does take into account the future of technology. There's $20 million annually dedicated for technology to bring the system along for whatever may come. We have last mile service. You know, you're going to go to a bus stop in this plan, and you're going to stop, and it's going to have a kiosk, and it's going to tell you, you know, a countdown of when the next bus is coming. It's going to give you a unified map and a paying system. It's going to have an application for an Uber or a Lyft or a Chariot, and it's going to take you that last mile home. So I would tell you this. As a smart board member, we've got a new service, the fast service, okay? And I was very confident and very instrumental in making sure that service reached the airport, okay? Today, and these buses have Wi-Fi on them, they're much more technologically advanced. On Sundays, this service is up 65%. If you build it, they will come. If you provide the service and you provide it the right way.
Paul Glantz, I have to ask you this question because there has been a very, very heavy push here at the conference on this issue. Are you convinced in any way? Have you been moved by the 220 businesses that came out suggesting that they want to see a unified regional transit system and see this on the ballot?
Well, you know, I was asked to join as well, and I can tell you I've respectfully declined. And I'm a big believer that everyone is entitled to their opinion. I certainly don't take exception with those who believe that the plan as proposed is the right one. I live in a world where we don't do a bad deal just to do a deal. And again, we go back to the cost issue. I'm really very much in favor of subsidizing the elderly, the low-income workers, the disabled. That's great. But why do we need to superimpose another layer of government bureaucracy while we're talking about the fact that's the only viable plan? What do you say we rationalize government while we're at it?
Yeah, so if I could speak to that, he's actually exactly right. Right now we've got SMART, we've got DDOT, we've got RTA. The truth is, in the 4-county region, there are 140 different municipalities. All of them have line items in their budgets spending something on transit. The beautiful part of the RTA is that it gets rid of the bureaucracy that he's talking about. It's a regional authority. Think about the bureaucracy we're getting rid of, and think of the buying power through economies of scale of how much we can actually provide. Your dollar actually stretches longer. So he brings up an excellent point. We need to have less bureaucracy in a one region authority.
Well, as a former government employee, I sort of, bristle a little bit at the notion that government doesn't function at all, but that's okay.
Marginally.
So we got about a minute left here, and I want to give everybody a last shot to woo people to your side. So you get 30 seconds, Paul.
You know, I would simply suggest, Craig, that there is a better opportunity forward, and that is that we should be supporting our mobility initiative. We should be using a 21st century technology. We should be committed to that as the underpinning, the basis for this. Second of all, we should be looking at ways to assess lower costs by providing fewer subsidies to those who don't need subsidies. And with that, I'll turn it over to Khalil for the last word.
You get the last 30 seconds.
I do think you're right. Since the 70s, we've been trying to attack this problem. We've always thought that new technology would come, and here we are still talking about it. I think, look, for less than $10 a month, we can help solve a 40, 50-year problem in our region. And more than anything, here's what I'd ask. We're not even asking for you to promote the plan. We're just asking